So in the previous video, we talked about how you can record a macro and how you can edit in a macro that you have just recorded. We also talked about how to set up the developer tab, which should already be in your environment right now. In this video, we're going to talk about subroutines and variables. So sub and in sub contains a subroutine in itself. You have to start with the word sub and end it with the word in sub. It is just the syntax of the programming language. So say we want to make our own sub right here from scratch. We simply say sub. We can call it program1. And it automatically makes the end sub when you click enter. So in here you have to write the code. And you get to define what the sub is called. You can see here program1, we just called it program1. If you already have taken algebra in high school, you already know what a variable is. In programming language, it is the same thing as what you've learned in high school algebra. In terms of computer language, we say that a variable is the way you store some value in a specified name you select. You can refer to this name later to retrieve the variable later in the program. Also note that a variable must be a single word with no spaces, and you cannot be reserved. It cannot be like reserved words such as if and for and so on. But we'll talk more about that later on. So for example, let's say that we define a variable here, say x equals 50 and say y equals 40. And let's say a equals x plus y. Well, I didn't talk about it in the previous video, but there's something called debugging in programming as well. And there's also debugging in VBA, of course. So debugging is essentially that you go through the code step by step and you are trying to see how the code runs your code. And you can do that by simply pressing F8. And once you press F8, you will see a small yellow cursor on your program here. So let me show you. If you press F8, it starts. So now we are in the debugger, or the debugger is in the code. If you click F8 once more, it jumps to the next statement here. And you can see that x right now is empty because the variable x has not been defined yet because we have not run the code yet. But now we run the code by clicking F8 once again. And now you can see, well, x equals 50. Likewise, y is empty, but we have assigned a value to y, which is 40. So if you click F8 once again, you end up with that x is equal to 50 and y equals 40. And you can see, well, a is empty right now because a has not been assigned yet. If you click F8 once again, you simply see that a equals to 90, which is 50 plus 40. So this is how you can define variables in VBA. It's a pretty simple way to do it. And what I talked about before is that you cannot use reserved words, because if, for example, you want to, well, you can call x, I don't know, apple. Apple equals 50. That's not a problem, but of course you have to change it here. So you have to change your x to apple as well. And then once again, we just debug and we can see, well, a equals to 50, which is the apple's value, and y, which is 40. So it's pretty simple. But if instead of calling 50, if instead of assigning 50 to the variable apple, if we say if equals 50, we can see, well, there's a compile error. The reason why there's a compile error is because if is a reserved word. And you use normally if statements a lot in programming languages. You also use for because you're looping through some columns or some arrays. So basically what you want to keep in mind is that you cannot use the reserved words whenever you want to define a variable. Okay, that's it for today, and I hope to see you next time.